But let's move on then to the Katanga design. Now this is this is also a model done by Rob Wanchun, basically very recently for us. For a Trekyards episode, this is a hyper detailed Katanga model based on the motion picture, the very first Katanga we see, and there is some differences. Now, what first should really show to you all heavily more detailed, but the same design but more detailed. And like I said, we'll break down the battleships at the end, but it's almost identical, but the detail is so much more punched up. You know, gone is the smooth. Now we've got extra hull plating. What do you think? Evolution of design wise. Now it's also worth pointing out that this Katanga was first seen by, at least in the movie timeline, 2275, with the D6 being 2267, so that's a few years apart.
It's almost like they took the D7 design and refitted it, as we've kind of talked about. It looks like they've added additional armor plating, again kind of going back to what they originally did with the D5? Yeah. So more of that armored texture, feathered look almost on the over the whole ship.
You know what it could be? It could be the D7 highlighted physical armor, you know, like meters of plating, but then earlier in post iterations they added on like NG weapon dispersal plates on top of the main armor. So you've got like the two-pronged defense, but the D7 was so good at the armor, like maybe it polarized the armor plating, whereas then they added on the particle disbursement plating for the later iterations.
Very interesting idea.
Thank you.
Yes. Well, we all know the real reason that this is more detailed.
Budget
And big screen. It's got to be more interesting, but of course, here at Trekyards, we can't just go with that. We need to go in depth and kind of do the in-universe thing. So, yeah, I think additional armor plating, kind of upgrading systems, maybe going more back to their roots, maybe the thicker, more smooth plating of the D7 or whatever they had. I don't know if it was better armor or, you know, this is just a slimming down of that, perhaps. Maybe they refined the armor somewhat. But
because we're going to hit them later on, I think you should cut to the next ship, which is a very next classic, as it were.
Ooh. This is the Bird of Prey. This is the Burrell version that we see in Star Trek 3. And this is from 2285. So this is the smaller scout class vessel, or a dozen officers and men, as we said. Probably about 88 meters, at least according to FASA, that's the length. So... Again, gone is the underbelly guns. Gone are the guns on the bottom of the forward boom section. We got the two main guns on the wingtips, and you got the forward torpedo launcher. So, yeah, scout class vessel.
Isn't
not really
it also
made for battle, I don't think.
Oh no, absolutely not. Isn't it also a simplification though to the TOS aesthetic? But then because we see this in Star Trek 3, 10 years after, you know, motion picture, it's got the plating of a Katanga. So it'd be interesting to see a smooth version of this ship, which is the TOS era Bird of Prey.
A TOS era Bird of Prey would be interesting to see. You're absolutely right.
You simplify the colours, you take out all the plating, you maybe return one of the guns, maybe one of the sets of guns, and just make it a bit more simple. And there you go. You've got the this would make a lot of sense if you think about it in that context. They're armoring up.
Yeah, I agree. This could be the refitted TOS version, as it were. I don't know. I hate the retro one so much. It's just this is just such a nice upgrade from that. Is there one in between, do you think? Or do you think that this was the one that immediately followed the one we see in Enterprise? Because we know the Klingons like to keep their ships around for quite a while.
But this is 20... You know, the first time we saw the original Bird of Prey was 2153, and this appeared in 2285. Obviously, that's, again, when we saw them, and they're both older than that, for sure. But, I mean, there's going to be from the D5 to D7 to Katanga in this timeline. They're not going to be sticking with one sort of Bird of Prey. So there's going to be one in between at least. I would argue two. And I think you could easily make the two naturally. There's obvious steps in between. But I think this ship really focuses on the cloak. We know that the red element is the deflector, the cloak element. I think that is what this ship is. It's a that's how the Klingons are focusing. You know, you've got these big battleships that obviously do everything, and then you've got these smaller, they're medium-sized covort. They cloak, they decloak, they're part of an armada, they frontal assault, they do the damage, they don't need the extra guns, they need the power to the cloak, to the shields, and the ability to swap between them. That's the important thing. You know, if you had these extra guns and it makes cloak to shield time maybe 5 seconds as opposed to 2, that is enough time to get blown to hell. You know?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is definitely a surprise attack kind of craft.
Yeah.
Fly in, decloak, fire all 3 of your forward weapons, and then cloak and get the hell out of there so you can recharge.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as we saw in the Dominion War as well, they travel in packs. So that's what they're designed for. The fact that we saw one in Star Trek 3 was because they were actually rogue Klingons, you know, so they weren't supposed to be there. They weren't authorized by the Klingon government, so...
But let's skip forward some more years. Let's skip from Star Trek 3 to Star Trek 6. The next version is the Katanga. Now, this is the, I suppose, refit. This is not the Kronos 1 variant. This is actually quite a clever story. This is the original 3D model used in Deep Space Nine. Now, it has some flaws, says Rob Wondershun, but because it appeared in canon, we know this is a canonical version or iteration of the DS9 version. And like I said, we'll do a final comparison at the end. What's interesting is because... we see a flashback episode called Stuart?
Flashback.
Yes, in Voyager, they also used this model as it was their Katanga, which gives us the exact... We know that this version of the Katanga does appear in 2293, as opposed to the previous version we see in 2275. So we know there is a nice little gap there, and unless we'll break it down fully, but what's worth noting is that now the engines have changed. You've now got glowing elements. That is the big change. And there are more lights, and just the armour has changed. The Kronos 1 version is obviously a lot redder, has a different bridge configuration, but that is a unique... That's like Air Force 1, it is different. So we're going to talk about this in a minute, but I just want to point out this is a clever, like, in-between Katanga. And this is the one we see all the way into the end of DS9, because that's a 3D model they used. So this is the definitive Katanga model from then. Doesn't evolve anymore.
I think it's safe to say that this whole thing with the Klingon fleet, a lot of these ships were serving side by side for years. There's not necessarily, let's scrap all the old ones and bring in the new ones. They, of course, would use the old ones in conjunction. So, yeah, sometimes in a certain instance, you'd see an older version, and then the next day, if you're having really bad luck, run into another Klingon, and it's a newer version. And you're like, well, the ship's different, but it's all it's just a huge fleet, so they're not going to scrap all their old stuff. So let's shoot ahead into the future, as it were, and to the next generation. And go to 2367, where we see the Vorcha class. Now, this again is heavily influenced by Matt Jeffries' D7 design, but with some major upgrades and a new look for a new generation, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, straight away, we just did the Vorcha episode with Rick Snowback. Please do watch that to get the full scoop. But obviously you can see the basic profile, the basic how things are configured is the same. You've still got the back pod, you've still got the engines. But as I said earlier in this episode, they've now been sleeked, have now been given glow elements, they're pushing forward in technology. You also now got more weapons at the front. You've got it's just a nice and sort of scaled up. That's that's the one thing we know we'll talk about even later. But it's now going beyond the veil of the D design, the D7, whatever. Now there's probably is iterations on the D7. This is meant to be the flagship class in TNG. So this is probably a new build. There's still probably D something, D10, D11, whatever. But obviously they still keep to the same feel, which we've seen all the way from the Raptor. They keep the same for the attack ships, the battleships, the warships. That is their build geometry style. Now that, to be fair, this could be something like their warp core, the way they generate their warp field. This is their perfect configuration, and that is why they keep them in the same format pretty much the entire time. Because we're not all going to have the exact same warp field. Why would we?
Yeah. Plus, they look mean as hell, so keep that aggressive posture.
Yes. I mean, this is obviously the model from DS9. I just forgot we meant to mention that. But what do you think about evolution? Does this evolve from the Katanga? Is this a natural evolution?
Yeah, absolutely it is. Yeah. Especially the armor skin on it. It's it's definitely Katanga-esque, I guess. And yeah, we know that this was. Well, we found out this was designed to take on the bigger baddies that the Federation was kind of designing, like the Ambassador class and the Galaxy class. So this was, they had to upsize a little bit because their ships, like we said, the Klingons have this design philosophy: if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So let's use it forever. And this was like one of the new ones that they drafted: new nacelle configuration, new design, whole bunch of new elements in this one.
I just like how 3D it is. It's got more components, but it's certainly not pushing too much. It's just a bit more fully featured, if that makes sense.
Sure.
But which takes us on to the newest spaceship in the Klingon Armada, the Negvar. Introduced in 2372 as opposed to 2367, so a good few years. This is the biggest, baddest, definitely baddest ship in the Klingon fleet, the flagship of General Martok and Gowron. And what's interesting is that originally they were going to use the Vorcha studio model and just add pieces to it. So that's why it keeps a lot of the familiar aspects. But obviously it is. I mean, would you say it's in a sense a Vorcha refit, or is it no?
I think it's different enough and bigger enough that it's definitely an upgrade, because we know that the Vorcha was designed to be a new construction, not just using older technology and kind of refining it or adding to it. It was definitely a new construction. This, I think, is that next step for that. It's not using the
right.
It's not using the Vorcha's basic design elements and just upgrading them. I think this is a new, bigger, badder build, and because we know that the Vorcha was actually because it was one of the newest Klingon ships, designed for more diplomatic type missions. It had a lot of amenities that pretty much every other military Klingon ship never had. So I think this one probably incorporates a lot of that as well. But it's literally the next generation of Klingon ships. And again, it was to go up against the bigger. We got the Romulans with the Derridex. We got the Galaxy class ships. They needed to upsize, and I think the Vorchas just weren't quite cutting it. So I think this is definitely not a refit of the Vorcha, but like a new contract.
And as opposed to in TNG, when we see the Chancellor's flagship, it's not the KDF Vorcha, it's the KDF something else. This we see in DS9 is the KDF Negvar. This is the initial first one. I don't think we see any other versions in all of the show. So this is the absolute epitome. What I like about this is that it is definitely pushing away from the established Klingon aesthetic, but it is pushing in very specific ways that speak to its design, not its moving away, if that makes sense. So the Vorcha obviously had the evolution. This has the Vorcha base hull configuration, but what it's done is it's kept the back element, kept that back pod, it's taken the front pod, it's integrated, it's strengthened it, it's made it a lot bigger, a lot more functional, a lot more power. You've doubled up the engines and made them more integrated, which is what we see, in Enterprise E, slimming, more refined, integrated, a lot faster. It has to be a lot faster because of just the pure bulk. More guns on the sides, which links back to the Katanga, D7, try to say, having those guns, and now just a big, thicker, wings, a lot thicker, a lot more stuff, more level. Just there's more going on, more armored. Although it didn't fare too well in the one time we see it in the alternate universe, it gets blown through straight away. And then DS9 it was okay, and then Voyager it's pretty ineffective. It's a shuttle, but that's a special shuttle. But yeah.
Yeah. Now you say they've doubled up on the engines, but have they? I'm sure this is just two engines that are just. Just the way they're designed.
I'm not going to disagree. But I kind of like they did it as two twos, just like the Constellation. Like it needs those extra ones. The Constellation to have that extra long range. This one for redundancy, for power, for strong warp field to get it to that. Because the Klingon fleet has never been a fast fleet. But hey, if it hears Intrepid class and warp 9.975, can we really not be as fast as those ships? So let's double up. Let's create a stronger warp field. Let's push into those 9.9s.
Yeah, well, Well, let's jump ahead yet again to one of my all-time favorite Klingon designs. And this one's designed by John Eves. This is from 2388 and was seen in Renegades. This is the redesigned Klingon battlecruiser for Renegades. And this thing is fantastic.
Yes, and obviously fan film, but because it's designed by John Eves, who designed all of the Enterprise versions, I mean, there's a hell of a precedent that he understands this design, and so I take this ship as close to canon as possible. I mean, it's got all the familiar elements. It pushes them, in fact, it pushes them closer to the D5, but keeping that organicness as well. It's less about points as about curvy points, which links more into the future of tech than the past for some reason.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, the design language of this one speaks a lot to Klingon weaponry, I think, like the Batleth. It's got that shape in the front of the secondary hull, and it's taking that aggressive stance and just enhancing it. It's making it more, aggressive. And the one thing that really blows me away with this is the design of those nacelles.
Oh, I love them.
The way they trail off into a nice point at the back. It's just, this thing is just an awesome design evolution. And I think the Klingons are starting to kind of maybe consider aesthetics more now, do you think? I don't know. I mean, it looks like there's a lot of extraneous things here that really, you can just smooth them out and make them, straight. You don't have to have the curvy. But they're making them sexy now. The Klingons like that.
Yeah. I don't know what to say to that, but one thing I think is quite interesting about this design is that the bridge module isn't aggressive, but I kind of like it. It feels more functional. It feels as if it's taken that different direction because the function of the ship is different. The back is so aggressive. If the front was just a point, it would be contrived, I think. But to have it be so different, so integrated, so neat, it feels like a ship as opposed to just a weapon. It's a weird thing. I know it's a weird thing to say, but I like the different style between the two. And obviously, you got the side-mounted torpedo launchers, which John tried to do for a long time. You got the forward and side. It's awesome. A lot of weaponry packed into this ship, and an aft torpedo launcher, and there's even disruptors at the back aft as well, and there's wingtip ones, and there's a whole lot of things.
And I gotta say, for a Klingon design, that makes a lot of sense. You come in, shoot your forward photons and weapons, fly by them, shoot the side ones, and on the way out, you can destroy a ship in a single attack run.
Yeah. But is that honorable, Stuart?
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's something that the Klingons would definitely be incorporating into their designs, and I'm surprised they didn't do it, to be honest with you.
Yes. So, one thing I want to hit before we move on to the final battleship comparison is if we go to the scale. The scale is an interesting evolutionary step. If you go to the top scale picture, this is the iteration of D5 to D7 to Motion Picture Katanga to DS9 Katanga to Vorcha to Negvar. All scales as given in canon continuity. There's another great picture we did, which we'll also show now, about the Federation evolution to NX-01 to Sovereign. There is a, increasing leveling feel. This is the Klingon fleet. What do you think about this? All the way from NX-01 era to the DS9 era.
The design of weaponry and technology is interesting to me because people tend to, as a race or a species or whatever, design something that's going to be bigger and badder than your opponent, and of course they see that and they have to upsize as well. So who started the trend for upsizing? And was it just in their minds, their next one's going to be bigger, so we have to make ours bigger? It's always fascinated me, that whole approach to things, like how big are you eventually going to get? I mean, do you see the Enterprise J, 2 miles long, right?
Yeah. Well, look at the Derelicts. They skipped the beat and they just went, 100 years bigger just to beat them to the curve,
Yeah, exactly. The upscaling is very interesting to me. Usually technology, as it gets more advanced, becomes smaller, more compact.
See, I understand when people say that, but at the same token, these are bigger crews, bigger technology, faster speeds, more weapons. I mean, these aren't crews of 100, these are a crew of 1,000. They are doing longer missions. As territory gets bigger, you need to have, rather than 10 light years as your border, 1,000 light years, you need a bigger crew. You need a bigger, you know. So it does make sense. It's not so much bigger equals over. I mean, you got to remember, we're looking at a scale. It starts at 2152, ends at 2375. 220 years of history. Look at 220 years of our history. You know, it's pretty massive, and this is interesting. Now, sorry.
Oh, and it's exactly what you said too. I mean, the earlier tech, you're not going far from your home world, so you don't need a huge crew. You know, you can go home and replenish your crew and all that. But as your technology gets more advanced, you get farther and farther and farther from your home base. You have to have more crew and bigger rooms to accommodate that crew for extended periods, because your technology is improving, so you're getting farther away faster. So yeah, the sizing up does make sense in that regard, and you're right. Look at our history. You look at the old pirate ships. Look at the ships nowadays. I mean, it's the same thing.
I mean, you've gone from the need to have a single room targ pit on the Raptor class to needing to have an entire, you know, farm on the Negvar just to have enough targs to be able to, you know, slaughter for the food.
True.
You know, one thing that I like about this is that the D5 and D7 are actually very close in size, whereas the NX to Connie jumps. That's why the D7 is actually quite a lot smaller than the Connie, about 70 meters. That surprises most people. There is a size difference, but then it's also to put that much power in a small bundle. That's why I like the iteration between the D5 and D7 was about style, not size. We hope, theoretically, you know, the shapes evolve, it gets bulkier, because, you know, it is thinner, it gets bulkier, more people, but it doesn't push that leap. Then to the motion picture, you suddenly have the exact same design, but look how much they've upscaled it. That, I guess, is to jump the refit, which is about roughly, you know, 30-meter increase. It doesn't improve into DS9 because it's the same basic ship. Vorcha, decently hefty, you know, increase to cope with the galaxy, it's smaller galaxy. In Negvar, they really upped it. And you can definitely see, you know, it's not a Vorcha refit. You know, that aft pod is dramatically bigger. You know, and just about physical space. I mean, you're looking at a huge crew increase, which is definitely highlighted by, if you look at the side view evolution of these ships. Again, a lot more space being put into these ships, and then the Negvar, wow. I mean, obviously the bottom pods are, you know, weapons or engines, whatever, but still a lot thicker, a lot bigger crew. What do you think about the side view and how these shapes evolved?
Well, first I want to talk about sizing a little bit. The D7 surprised me when I first saw this. I didn't think it was quite that small compared to the Katanga.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons for that is my growing up with FASA, because there wasn't that much of a difference between the two in FASA. But you're right, compared to the Constitution class, the D7 is smaller. So that interests me right away. As for like getting bigger and bigger and bigger, as we talked about in our Vorcha episode, we know that they're incorporating more luxuries, as it were, into this design, because it was for diplomatic missions and things like that. So it wasn't just strictly a military vessel with the minimalistic, you know, hard bunks and no comfort for the warriors. And I think the Negvar also incorporates a lot of the newer luxuries, if you will. I guess they're getting soft because, you know, they're hanging out with the Federation too long. But so upsizing that way makes total sense. As for the design elements, you didn't put the Raptor in here, but
this is this is a battleship comparison specifically.
Yeah, I was just gonna say the Raptor has the more of the upswept nacelle design, which it kind of looks like they're going back to with the Negvar. At least not really upswept, but at least on the same horizontal plane as the main hull, right? So it's just an interesting design choice that they did that.
Can you see something, especially this side view? Look how similar the Vorcha and D5 are in terms of the aggressive points. Is that not almost a full circle in terms of design? Like, just it's clearly influencing, which it isn't, because it really isn't. I mean, but there is that language which is coming back. The Negvar breaks from that again, but that's obviously, I mean, you can just tell by this. This is a fan model, fair to say. But in fact, the Negvar on the side view looks close to a Katanga, where, you know, the front portion has the bridge, as opposed to the Vorcha, where it's slightly pushed back. It's got a raised segment. It's almost as if they're they're taking these different design languages and sort of reinserting them into the design philosophy. But it's kind of interesting that actually now you look, the D line and then the Vorcha, there is something connecting that. Those points are not unprecedented, which is fascinating. That a lot of these shapes tend to come back. I always find that interesting about Star Trek, especially even look at the Franklin. We did a whole episode on that comparison. It's like there is visual links, or Discovery, same thing. There is visual links. Yeah.
It's like fashion, man. It all comes back into fashion at some point, even bell bottoms.
Yes. So last of all, guys, we want to take you through just the 3 Katanga D7 whatever variants. We've got all 3 models now. Like I said, only one is a canonical model. You've got the Eagle Moss D7. You've got the Rob Onshun enhanced canon accurate Katanga motion picture, and then you've got the canonical D7, which is meant to be not the best model in the world. So starting at the D7. And what we can do is, if we're just going to flip through them to show you the audience, then we'll do all 3 at the same time. So D7, which then goes to the Katanga motion picture. You can see the detail differences, which then changes to the DS9. If you go back to the Katanga for motion picture, back to the D7, and then back to the Katanga, back to the D7. The styling, the geometry is changing. Where things are positioned, where whatever, it is iterating. If we start the D7 again, simple shapes. Go back to the Katanga, a lot more detail, then go back to the D7, the Katanga, sorry, a lot more light, a lot more glowy, is a lot more neon, and the nacelles are starting to be lit up. So that's the main differences. What do you see looking at these 3 iterations of the same shape?
Definitely a bulking out of the secondary hull, going from D7 all the way up to the the Star Trek 6 Katanga. There's just a refinement of shapes. That top arch is changing, and so is the bottom one. Looks like they're adding more decks each time.
That's interesting.
Not many, but it is there.
That's really interesting, yeah.
And the neck, the boom, is another thing. The flatness of the motion picture Katanga is interesting choice. I don't know if I like it. I prefer the one we see later in Star Trek 6. I prefer that a lot more. Yeah.
Interesting.
Other than that, the boom is not much difference. The top hat, as they call it.
Yeah. Well, I think if you look at the 3, and all 3 are being shown at the same time, I think the torpedo pod is getting smaller. It's much bulkier, getting smaller, and getting even smaller again. The shapes are changing. Again, we're comparing them. These aren't the real. Well, CG DS9 is, but it's difficult to really compare them. But there is some change, and I think it's interesting just to compare. At least one of these is the Canon, and Rob is very good at making sure these things are accurate. So I'm pretty happy to say, but it's
And it is hard to see these subtle little differences when you just see one and then you see another one later, because it's the exact same, but it's not. When you flip through them like this, and you can actually flip back and forth, you do see the subtle changes that normally you wouldn't even get a chance to see. Even if you were looking, online or whatever, it's hard to get the exact same position. Which when Samuel does these renders is awesome, because you can do that. You can just flip back and forth, and there are subtle changes that you can't pick up on. So that's why we're here, to help you guys out.
And I think that sums up the Klingon fleet, canon and non-canon and theoretical, from the start of time until the Negvar, and even slightly beyond. Wow, this went longer than I thought it was going to go, but hey, we wanted to cover everything. Any closing thoughts on the Klingon evolution, Stuart? Now you've taken the audience through a journey.
The Klingons are great. As we've said many times, as I've mentioned in many episodes, if they ain't broke, don't fix it. They do use stuff for a long time, but we know that the Federation also does that with the Excelsior class and stuff. So you use what you have at your disposal, and you don't have unlimited resources, unfortunately, even as a great empire. So I love that they incorporate older ships as well. There's probably still D7s serving in TNG era, perhaps, but the design evolution is just fantastic. They do keep the basic look and feel, and it's just a refinement on shapes, and it's a lot more subtle in the Klingons than it is in like the Federation. Federation, you do see some major changes between TNG or TOS and TNG. I mean, the TNG Klingon ships are very much different than the TOS ones as well, but I think that's because of their collaboration with the Federation, that kind of technology exchange, as we talked with Rick about, especially like the hull plating color changes and things like that. But then we go to the Renegades, which is, again, in the future, and it keeps more of the feel of the TOS and everything that came before. So, I don't know. I think they got great designers. That's all I can say.
Yeah, and
great head scratchers. They design good things.
Yeah, and it is worth again pointing out that John Eves designed everything from Enterprise. Rick designed the latest two. John, in fact, designed the Renegades version, and Matt Jeffries designed the classic, which was only iterated upon. Same design. So it's very much his three designers that have built this aesthetic, and they all loved the original, and they all wanted to keep something. And I looking at it in this order is very interesting, and I think there is a genuine evolution, a genuine language that is speaking, as we already said, to the need for just bigger ships with more capabilities to do longer missions, and yet they keep a similar understanding of how things need to work for them. I think it could be warp fields, I think it could be whatever, just they like having a certain line of sight, whatever. And I think the Klingon fleet is one of the best fleets bar Federation. They got the most ships, they got the most exploration in terms of who they are and what they do. And I hope you guys have enjoyed this pretty thorough, I think, look at the Klingon fleet through the ages. I think that pretty much sums it up, Stuart.
It does indeed. So if you like the video, click the like button. Don't forget to subscribe, share the video, do all that stuff. If you don't want to miss out, click the notification little bell icon so you get notified every time I release a video. And
if you want to support this show, go over to Patreon, our monthly donation service that helps us keep the lights on here at Trekyards. Donate what you can, and that comes to us every single month. Or even at our website, trekyards.com. Click that donate button and give what you can. And of course, you're going to get more episodes with fantastic renders of a lot of the original 3D models and other models, because we have basically a lot of great stuff. We want to show it to you guys, give you new perspectives, just like that attack ships you didn't even know about. That's what we do here, and I can't wait for the next episode. So, until next time, guys, I'm Connor Cockings.
I'm Captain Foley.
And I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.
Bye. It's a good day to die. But don't die. Come back and watch us again.
Bye, guys.